stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening. Thanks for coming. The first item, I see Mrs. Walunas in the back, so I'm going to go one by one here so she doesn't call me out later. The first item on our agenda was a tree hearing, which has been canceled. The planning board has taken jurisdiction over this matter and has held the hearing already, so there's no further action by the Board of Selectmen. Next is a joint meeting with the Board of Water Commissioners, and a few weeks ago we had asked to meet jointly with them for a couple of issues. So, John, if you want to.
One of the issues we have is the question on a potential conflict of interest with an employee that retired and is hired back in basically the same capacity as a consultant, and that person isn't truly a consultant in the definition of the state. So that was one of the issues we want to talk about, because we think there's a risk there to the town, liability to the town there. Under Mass General Laws 268A, I believe, is where the conflict of interest statute is. You can't hire somebody back in basically the same position or similar position that left, and I think there's a minimum of a year in between. So my understanding is we had somebody retire, put them right back on the payroll for basically the same work, well, as a consultant, a so-called consultant, but there's a whole list of criteria that a consultant has to meet in order to be called a bona fide consultant under the Mass laws. One of them is the person has to be in business for him or herself as a routine business. They have to maintain an office, they have to maintain, everything separate. They can't be controlled by the people that they're working for. And also, you can't have just done that job and then come back around and do it again. That's a real clear one. So our concerns are that this is towns can have liability on this. So we just wanted to talk about that.
Before you answer, Mr. Neal, would you mind going to the microphone? Because at the last meeting that I wasn't able to attend, I did watch from home while eating popcorn, and you can't hear anybody in the audience unless they're standing at the microphone. Yeah.
That's good. She critiqued us why she was home. I like that.
So first question, under, you referenced Mass General Law, which?
268A, I believe, which is the conflict of interest law.
I threw it up on the board.
That doesn't help me from here.
Yeah. But there's certain items in there, and one of them is a person leaving a position, coming back and doing the same. That stands out.
Well, again, he retired, from his position in town. He's been, our superintendent now is Tom Gone.
Right.
We have only one full-time employee in the water department, that is the superintendent.
Yeah.
The rest of, we do use a couple of highway guys for construction type work, reading the meters type work.
Yeah. Well, I guess the best way to do this is, and it's up to the employee, if you will, or the consultant in this case, to contact the Mass Ethics Commission and let them know what he is doing versus what his other position was, and give them all the criteria, and they'll issue a written opinion on that.
Okay, so the point being that Joe's got a call, contact.
Yeah, contact.
I think when this came up with the highway department previously, one of the things was if you were retiring, you had to take a certain amount of time off before you could go back in as a consultant, and so we ran into that problem.
Heather, are you seeing anything? You're going faster than I can read, so.
Well, I'm trying to find the correct section.
So 18,
This one may or may not be it, because this talks
18A.
about,
Yeah, I mean, you can use that as, the former employee who knowingly acts as agent or receives compensation. There's a lot of those that intertwine. And I happen to deal with this in my daytime job, if you will, and there's a lot of times where we have to tell people you can't come back because this is pretty much what you did before. You can't work for a state agency unless he could come back if he retired at 80%, let's say. He can come back, work as an 03 employee for that 20% difference without affecting his retirement. I believe anything over that 20%, it would decrease his retirement. But But he can come back as an O3 employee or a regular employee, I believe.
But for that, we need to have a position posted, approved, and then,
But if that's the right way to do it, that's the way we gotta do it.
which we have submitted a position.
Right. But if truly that's the only way he can do it, he shouldn't be working now. You know, my understanding is we brought him back pretty much on the same compensation level too as when he left. Is that accurate?
Yes.
So-
The 18-hour position was posted at the, no benefits and
How many hours?
18 hours a week.
And what's his compensation for doing that? Are you talking about the consultant position or, a new position?
New position.
Okay, so a new position at 18 hours would be substantially less than the consultant is getting now.
Would not be.
Would not be?
Yeah, correct, would not be.
Wha-
30, I think it was posted either $30 or $32 an hour, and that's been submitted to the Policies and Procedures Board, and I saw on
Okay.
their agenda they were supposed to
What's
undertake
this,
that last week.
what's the consultant making now? Isn't it like 70-something thousand a year? I'm just going on memory here, so I may be wrong, but,
But he's limited to the 18 hours a week, or it affects his retirement too.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
So anyways, our recommendation, or at least my recommendation, and the rest can pipe in, is that he go through the ethics board and get something in writing saying that this isn't a conflict of interest, and bring it back to us so everybody, it protects him, you,
Yep.
and us.
No, that's
Yeah.
a reasonable request. We'll
That's why I'm not using a name, because person's a very nice person, I just don't want to, say anything personal, because that's not what it is.
Are we done with that, so I can move on?
I believe so.
So I just have a question. Remember when you were here the last time, we talked about water usage and how normally we start using Easthampton's water later than we had.
correct.
Can you give us an update on that? And I'm sitting now at soccer practices and people are saying, oh, we have all these new developments going in and what's going to happen with our water and do we have enough and that
We
kind of
are,
stuff.
we are at, we put in a voluntary water restrictions.
Did you notice any difference with it?
No.
None.
Basically, on the daily reads, it's not, because it's voluntary, it's not been an impact. And while I think I've, noticed some sprinklers running even odd days as requested, I've also noticed them running while it's still raining. Like this morning on my way to work.
An all day.
Oh, yeah.
All day, you say?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sprinklers all day?
I see them when they're, because you're not supposed to water it during the day.
Yeah, 'cause it's not good for,
Later in the day.
yeah,
Supposed to be-
yeah. Or first thing in the
You
morning.
see it, 8 o'clock.
Not between
9
8 AM and 5 PM, you're not, that was a voluntary request,
Yeah.
but
And so what's the commission's thought on, we keep adding developments to town, and what's that gonna do to our water supply? What kind of position are we gonna be in?
right now, our average daily withdrawal, permitted withdrawal, is I think .36 million gallons a day, and we're at like .33. We're right there. We're right there at our maximum.
And how many
permitted.
houses does it take to put us over that? Sorry.
Depends on how many. how
I'm
much-
just wondering, how many more developments go in before we have a problem?
I think we talked about it, and it was like 100, huh? It was under 100 houses.
4 years or something. 4 or 5 years.
Well, it was like 100 more houses. The average that the state uses is 70 gallons per capita per day, is what they assume usage will be. If it falls within that range, that .3 or .03 million gallons, it's about 100 more houses when you're done.
Okay,
100 more houses with how many people in them?
Our
Average of
town
4.
average is 2.5, is our average for the town.
of
And
number of
that's
people
the-
that live in a house?
That's the average that's used by the state to determine,
So closer to 50 houses then, because I don't know how many houses.
if you've got 4 or 5 people in a house,
Yeah, okay,
obviously the daily usage is going to be higher.
okay.
A question, we get the standard bill of $42, if I remember right.
Yes.
What does that include? I mean, what does it anticipate the average family using? Is that 70
The
gallon?
quarterly bill is $42, and it's 12,000 gallons of water for the
Now, I've never gotten a bill over that, so my curiosity is, do most people just pay that $42 a quarter, or we have a lot of them that go well outside that? and
Mine's
get-
way over.
Stop watering your lawn at noon.
You want your
I
lawn?
water my lawn, I tried to burn it, but I have a lot more people in
Always
my
seem
house.
very reasonable.
Yeah,
as far-
it's a reasonable amount, and I don't know the percentage of the total bills that are,
No.
I mean, we are some customer that have bills for the quarter that are several $100s.
Yeah. Yeah. Even when I had a pool, I never went over that.
Okay. Are there any other questions for the board?
Are there questions?
Questions from the commission?
Well, a comment, just a comment. We've heard of two towns now. I think we were talking just before, it's South Deerfield. Sunderland has enacted a new regulation purportedly. We haven't verified that yet. And I also had a town, I was told about a town out east, but basically they have instituted requirements in town. If you want to use water for irrigation purposes, you drill your own well. You don't use public water.
Can lots of people drill their own, like, do you have to have special ground to,
Well, you've got to have adequate ground. You got to have, someplace to drill the, property to drill the well on. You got to be away from septic tank and everything else. I mean, all that stuff kicks in, but.
okay. Oh, go ahead.
The Board of Health in Southampton years ago adopted well regulations. Part of that was irrigation. So I think your commission and the Board of Health should talk to each other, because they can control that from their end.
They adopted them, did they get approved and all of that stuff, and we're just not following them, or did they just draft them and they?
When the
sat?
Board of Health adopts a regulation as the force of law, it doesn't require town meeting. It's been adopted, acted upon, and I mean, I'm not current with what's going on, but they did establish those laws a long time ago. And I believe they had irrigation in them because some 20 years ago, I helped them with the drafting of those regulations. So that's why I'm pointing him back to the Board of Health, because they're the ones that are the regulatory authority relative to wells.
So the teeth may be there, we just don't know it.
Right.
I think the teeth is actually there.
Okay.
But that's for irrigation with public wells. To make that differentiation,
This
again,
is private wells installations.
right,
Public wells fall under DEP.
yes.
Even irrigation wells at that capacity fall under DEP.
Right.
The rest of it falls under your local health department.
So Tom, this is the current regulations as of 2012 anyway, for the town of Sunderland, and as Charlie suggested, this actually comes from the Board of Health for their well regulations. It's 14
Yeah.
pages, you're not gonna
No.
wanna read the whole
No.
thing.
Well, you
Tom, we worked on
can
this.
email it to me, right? Oh, that's from 2012.
Yeah, so I have
So
to see if
this
there's
is-
been any amendments. We'll pull it up in the news.
This town, I believe, still has its well regulations. That's the starting point.
Yeah, we'll check with the Board of Health and
Yep.
see.
Good point. Anything else? Anybody? Okay, thank you very much for
Okay,
coming in, we
very
appreciate your
good.
time.
Thank you.
The next topic is discussion regarding additional roads and extra water supply for road maintenance with Randall, but he's requested that this be discussed when he's before the Board of Selectmen in September, so we're going to pass over that. Next, we have the town administrator report.
Oh, you ready for me already? I'm telling that's another article, that one's from May. But I've only had 4 minutes to research. About 15, we'll find something useful. All right, so just a couple updates from things over the past few weeks. Regarding the telephone for the town, we had initially looked into VoIPS, a voice over internet. That's about as far as they go in the acronym. We're currently looking at 3 different companies to what they can provide, comparing them all, looking at how that number contrasts with what we're currently paying annually to Verizon for our telephone service. hoping to make progress on that. This morning, Dawn Snyder, the emergency management director, Randall, the highway super, and myself, we met again on the generator. We had another company come out and they confirmed the same thing the first one did, that they do believe it is the same part that needs to be replaced, the stator. So now we're just waiting for an official 100% quote from the only person we've spoken to who actually says they can fix it. So we're seeing what numbers come in. We need to know exactly what the cost is going to be. We're looking at about $5,000 to repair, but to buy new would be about 16 grand and some change. Follow-ups from last meeting, still working on community compact ideas. This is the state's program that they enacted with the new government, with the governor and the lieutenant. And they had put in place, the idea is to actually work with the community, provide resources to establish one of the best practices, whether it be financial or other. Still looking at some of the ideas, and hopefully I'll have that on the next agenda for a vote of which direction the Board of Selectmen would like to go. A lot of communities have submitted so far. I think there's like 20 or 25, which actually isn't too bad because it takes them a few days to follow up on questions and get information out and write up a document. And once we do go forward with the best practice, the benefits are that, first of all, they'll provide us resources. I think we have a year or two to implement it. And in addition to that, it makes us eligible for certain grants from the state that will have a higher preference list on. Other things, calendar in the works. Mrs. Walunas last time had actually looked into how other communities do and other groups work on a calendar. One of the board's concerns prior weeks was that we don't always know when folks are out on vacation. They had suggested if we can have some kind of calendar that interacts with each other. Other than Outlook, we've yet to find anything. We did discover what I think is really cool called Doodle, Doodle.com. It actually allows you to do scheduling. So we recently used that with a group of about 20 people to try to figure out the best day and time for a meeting. So that was fun to watch. On another note, which is related, the Gwinner property, which has to do with the Winding Rivers, who you saw before the Board of Selectmen a few months ago, they wish to move forward with having a joint meeting with Easthampton town officials and Southampton town officials. And that is what we use Doodle for, to set up such a meeting. And it looks like it's coming up in September. We just don't know what the date is. I'm waiting to hear confirmation from Winding River. But out of the 11 people who responded, 9 people were available for 2 different times. That was kind of exciting. That was the highest group we had for turnout. Other projects that are underway. So we're still working on the consolidation of HR files and compliance laws. We have a preventive maintenance meeting tomorrow night with myself, John, Charlie, and Randall, and Art. Again, that piece is to look at putting together what we actually need to have done to all the departments. It's at 6 o'clock, guys. It allows us to look forward as to what we need to do over the years of just maintaining the buildings we already have in place and making sure we're more on top of things. As we spoke last time, you know, we have different things like the gutters of this building that fell down that hadn't been replaced, gutters over at the police station that need to be repaired, and just keeping track of things on a, whether it be weekly, monthly, or annual basis in order to figure out as problems arise instead of after they become a disaster. We have monthly board committee commission representative meeting on September 9th. That's been going pretty good. We usually get a solid 4 or 5 plus people come to each of the meetings. Some of these people represent multi boards, committees, and commissions, so it's always helpful. I find them helpful. Tom, do you find them helpful? Yeah. Okay. We usually go over different information, including whether it's an ethics law, open meeting law, anything that would be pertinent to the group, and things that have either raised questions in the past or people have had concerns about, or just a great resource to have. Final review of the financial guidebook. We're still working on that. We had to postpone it a couple times due to trainings. We're hoping to work on that more next week. Part of the book, we are looking for contributions from the Capital Improvement Committee, which will be reconvening the 1st of September, so that's kind of exciting. My hope for them is that, Charlie.
Just making sure.
Okay. The Capital Improvement Committee, my hope is that they will be able to look at their documents that they had utilized last year, do any revisions they need to, and also work on putting the requests folks had submitted the previous year that were not fulfilled into a larger, long-term capital plan. So that'll be a nice concept. And like I said, they have a part of contribution to the financial guidebook. So once they meet, we'll be able to resume, otherwise we're still missing a piece. 3-year finance plan, we met the other day. We made several different assignments as to who is responsible for what information. We're hoping to meet again in 2 weeks. My goal is to really get that presented to Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen, hopefully before October, so we have a 3 to 5 year finance plan in place before we start budget season. Dog bylaws, they're still in progress. That's all I have on that one. Let's see, other things. So one of the other things we are looking at, and in this case, I believe we're going to talk to the Pretty Please Board on Thursday afternoon about this, is the notion we talked about before with the Board of Selectmen of establishing a wage and classification plan for the town of Southampton. We do have something in place currently, but all it really says is different grades and different steps. It doesn't ever say what positions and what grade. And there's no real qualifications or classification of what each grade is. So this is a direction we're kind of hoping to go. We're also starting to work with each department. I've only been to one so far, so if I haven't got there, I'm working on it, but to rework all the job descriptions and make sure they're reflective. And then hopefully, just to extend the plan out a little bit more, we're hoping to actually consolidate everyone's job descriptions into the same format. So instead of having 20 different versions of a job, when you look from department to department, if you see a job description, you know it's from the town of Southampton. It says the grade, it says the title, it says the department, et cetera, et cetera. But hopefully we'll put that before the PPPB board on Thursday, and they'll see if that's something they'd like to work on. Other things, it comes up later on in the agenda for this evening, a special town meeting. Just a reminder, we do have a lot of things we need to take care of this fall, whether it be the building expenses for Town Hall in Larrabee that will be depleted by then, Sharps program that's no longer going to be funded through a grant program, the police department wages, and if there's any resolution with the collective bargaining agreements, there may need to be some transfers in that case. Regardless, and dog bylaws, can't forget the dog bylaws. We will not know when free cash is certified. As we talked about before, the concern comes down to DOR. Had a lot of folks retire this year. They're taking on more projects. They have less staff. And although they will prioritize the certification of free cash if your community says that you are looking to spend it, who knows how many communities that's going to be and how much the backlog is going to be on their part.
When was it certified last year?
I want to say October, November. October. Once we start in budget season, it's all a blur.
Okay.
So, and then just one last thing is upcoming department meetings, as we talked about last meeting. The board had requested over time that they would start seeing different representatives from boards, committees, departments, et cetera, come before them on a regular basis. So we had prioritized folks based on how large the department was. So we had public safety, which is police, fire, highway, emergency management director, and the Board of Health, and they're scheduled to come in the first meeting of September. And not necessarily the whole board, committee, or commission, just a representative from the board, commission, committee, or department, just to say, 5 minutes, this is what we're doing, this is what we're working on, here's our problems, here's our changes, isn't this great?
I know that we had one department that can't come that day. Did we send an email back to reschedule yet?
I didn't reschedule. I don't think that's a good idea to go down because we are meeting with someone every single month. I would prefer if they just sent someone representing their department. It's a large department, so they should be able to find someone.
Okay.
Anything further for me? All right.
Select board updates or liaison reports? Anybody?
There's really nothing going on, except somewhere we have to have a new committee.
Have what?
There's something about a new committee in here
There is, it's coming.
coming up.
Two committees, one's bylaw, one's
Yeah.
cable.
Yep.
We do have something, Liz.
Okay.
I don't know if it fits into this, but they're supposed to be starting to install the automated doors in this building tomorrow.
Okay. Reports from departments, boards, or committees? Anybody?
For master planning this summer? yet, so
I wondered about that the other day.
rail trail negotiation committee, there's nothing.
Open time for the public?
Tamara Lunas, 298 College Highway. Sorry, I have not been here in a while, and I do have a question that kind of pertains to something that was asked about from the Water Commission. So I don't know, did you ever get an update? Donna Whately had asked about, she wanted new software.
I think there was a email trail that went back and forth that I tried to keep up with purchasing the system and getting it on the same page and the new quarter, and I thought we were moving ahead with that,
With,
the new system. Right? Point or something like that.
Is that something we should have you explain or give the public an update?
Let me just make sure I know, it's the system that kind of coincides with the same system that Donna uses and a gun to scan for the water usage, and it makes the billing a little more mainstream.
To see
Or-
billing software.
Yeah. Am I right? Oh, maybe not.
It's basically, Donna came to us and gave us a proposal back in January of two softwares, but Point and SoftWrite. That, one of the questions we asked back, so which direction are you going to go? Because there's two different proposals here, and one was considerably more money than the other. Our consultant that we've used for our billings has worked well for us. We've not had issues. He's available to the people in the collector's office when they have questions or they have problems. He remotes in, takes care of it, done, finished. And all that's done at no additional, there's no billing for that services. Donna wanted to go with the Point software because it would allow her to post information better, as she indicated, that would allow her to do her job a little easier.
Okay.
The board met, voted to go forward with that process. The concern that the board has is it's now a very short-term implementation process for the billing. Our next read is scheduled for September 14th. And that only gives a few weeks for Point and Thai Sales to get their components in place. The other concern on the board's part and my part in particular is a smooth transition, mainly because this is one of the largest quarters for billing, billing-wise, so we can't have any difficulties with the bills. And to be able to run, the board's intention was to run the two systems concurrently for at least one quarter. The details from Point and Thai Sales, how that gets accomplished, hasn't been sorted out yet, because for the Point software, the guns have to be upgraded to a new version of the N-Sight software, which is being supplied by Thai Sales. Once that happens, the guns no longer function with the existing software, which is the QuickBooks that's presently used. So we've got to either have two separate sets of guns for the first quarter. There's some details that need to be ironed out to make sure that once the billing transitions, we're able to basically double check the system, make sure the new system's not dropping anything that's in the old billing system.
Okay. Okay.
And
Tom, did-
software transitions, I find, are never smooth, in my personal
I'm
experience.
experiencing that right now, actually.
Did you mention the financial difference? Because I think that was one of the
Well, that was one of the points that Donna was looking at, was that overall, we should see a reduction in the costs of doing the bills, Presently, our present consultant, we pay $4 per bill to take the information, read it into the software, generate the bills, print the bills, fold the bills, put them in envelopes and get them to us. And then we post them through the postage meter and send them out. We should, on the information provided indicates that we should be able to get that down to about $1 a bill with the new system.
Is there a downfall to not starting with the new quarter?
The only downfall that Donna sees is she would have to post in both softwares, and she found that that would be somewhat burdensome for her
Okay.
department.
Are you feeling rushed?
Yes.
Trying- Yeah.
And so what do you expect your
Well,
timeframe to be?
the gentleman, Jim Regan from Point, is on vacation this week. He's supposed to be back Monday next week. We're trying to set up a conference call at least to sort out, make sure things are going well. And if you've experienced a software change, it's always, the vendor tells you everything goes smooth. And again, personal experience, it never goes quite so smooth.
Fair enough.
6 weeks is probably a better implementation time frame, but we would miss the billing time. And we're on normally a 90-day billing schedule every
So after
quarter.
September 14th, what's the next read after that?
September 14th would be December.
December.
Okay.
So we miss we'd miss a quarter as far as postings. It'd have to be done twice,
Okay.
once in each system.
Okay.
Any other
Any
questions?
Mrs. Willis, does that answer your question? Okay. Thank you. Anybody else for open time for the public? Okay. Next, we have the establishment of a cable advisory committee. It's needed for a contract with Charter. Thanks so much. Have a good night. So we need to begin negotiating our renewal for the town with Charter. It's been recommended that we reestablish a cable advisory committee to work on this negotiation and determining the town's needs. It's recommended that we establish a 3-member committee, although I think that this note is wrong. It should be a 4-member committee because it says with an ex officio member being the ECAT Executive Director Kathy Lynch, a BOS member, and 2 members of the public.
Well, I did mean initially when I wrote the note to be 3, because as an ex officio, Kathy can't vote, but she
Okay.
can just speak
Be
as
there.
to, if
Okay.
people have questions.
Got it.
It was requested, or suggested that it be 3, just because like anything else, it's sometimes hard to get 3 out of 5 people for a quorum, but other communities tend to have 5. You actually have a sample next to you of a draft of what I found from another community for the, formation of a cable advisory committee.
Would you like me to read this?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so before I read this, how often does a cable advisory committee meet?
Charlie, you had experience with this in the past? So I think it's as needed, would be my guess, but.
Yeah,
So it's
usually-
not a time commitment of every single week or once a month or the 3rd Friday of every 3rd month or something like
It's
that?
busy at the beginning, and then it just tapers off once everybody gets lined up as to where to go.
Okay,
In fact, I don't mind if you want me to serve on this as selectman's liaison. It doesn't bother
you're
me.
in. I vote Charlie.
Well, that was easy.
So I will read this. If there's anything that you want me to stop at or reread or whatever, let me know. The purpose of the Cable Television Advisory Committee is to provide advice and assistance to the Board of Selectmen in monitoring compliance with the cable television license agreement and other aspects of cable television service in Southampton, including the local access channels. The Cable Television Advisory Committee shall be comprised of 5 citizens. Is that part we need to keep open?
The board can decide however they wish. I simply gave them an example from my surrounding community.
Appointed by the Board of Selectmen for 2 terms. So can we put all of that up for discussion at some point? Maybe like 1-year term or something in case somebody decides
How
not.
long does that committee need to be in effect?
Yeah, how long is it,
So the
How-
contract's-
Well, most,
so the contract's done? That's
yeah,
it?
most communities keep them in effect regularly and they meet as needed. So one thing we run into on occasion is we'll get a complaint. So say Shannon calls up and says, I live at 2 Main Street and, I've been working with Charter for 8 months. I've called them 5 times and they're not responding to my issue. Can you deal with this? It's another tool for the town administrator and the Board of Selectmen to have a group who says, you know what, we're happy to call Tom Cohen.
Okay.
Let me pull up his phone number.
Okay. The committee shall elect a chairman and a clerk. The membership shall be made of citizens with diverse backgrounds and should include at least one person knowledgeable in the technical aspects of cable television service. Under federal law, local licensing authorities no longer regulate cable television rates and fees. Nevertheless, it's important that a group exists to receive and review citizen complaints and concerns about cable television service and to communicate with the cable provider, the state regulators, other entities involved in cable service, and the local access channels. To review the duties and responsibilities. To review and be familiar with the broad terms of the cable licensing agreement between the Board of Selectmen and the franchisee. To advise the Board of Selectmen during the negotiations for successor licensing agreements and to help ensure compliance with renewal requirements. To receive and evaluate citizen complaints, concerns, and suggestions concerning cable service, compliance with the agreement and other aspects of cable service. To evaluate the performance of the PEG, Public Educational and Government Access Provider for community access television services. To meet with the Board of Selectmen from time to time and to advise the board on matters concerning service compliance, the regulatory climate, and other matters of relevance to cable subscribers. To submit an annual report of activities to be included in the annual report. To conduct an annual public hearing to review the performance of the PEG access provider. And to perform such other duties related to cable service as the Selectmen may from time to time. To continue to investigate and to advise the Board of Selectmen on new technologies. The Cable Television Advisory Committee is responsible for conducting its activities in compliance with all relevant state and local laws and regulations, including but not limited to the open meeting law, the public records law, and the conflict of interest law. Are there any questions about that? If there are no other questions about it, I would accept a motion to reestablish the Cable Advisory Committee with the mission of recommending,
With a three-member
with
board.
a three-member board.
Appointed for 2 years.
Second.
Does it, a second for discussion, does it have to be appointed, or is it something that somebody, well, I guess appointed, yeah, I got, yeah, okay.
So
sorry.
what I'd recommend is if the board chooses to adopt this and to move forward, that we post it for a period of, say, until next month at this time, and then at that point, anyone who has an application of interest, like Mrs. Walunas, she can submit it and the board can appoint.
Mrs.
Can
Williams?
I ask a question? Back when we were having issues with Comcast changing over to be Charter,
Charter.
and there was a question about them doing security checks on Tri-Wire, was that question that would have gone to this committee? Or was it something that should have gone to you guys, or, because I know that came up, because there's a lot of break-ins.
I don't know the answer.
Yes, that would be the committee to
That
work
would
on.
be the committee.
Yes.
Thank
Was it
you.
Question of going from Charter to Comcast a while back, they're gonna buy them out, but I think that fell through.
Tri-Wire was the third party who would install things for Charter,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, Yeah, I didn't like them either.
Yeah, okay. So there's a motion and a second on the floor. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Next, we have appointments. Rick Tebow to the Conservation Commission.
Excuse me.
Yes.
Do we need to do an official motion to put Charlie on as our liaison?
Oh, if you want to do that, sure.
You want to do that now, or you?
Yeah, we can do that now.
Well, we established
Well,
a committee, so you'll be the
Get
point
that out of the
person.
way.
get it out of the way. So go ahead, John, if you want to make the motion.
I'll make a motion that Charlie is the board liaison on this committee.
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
And if there's any questions, now they can go to you.
First time, what?
The next we have two appointments, Rick Tebow to the Conservation Commission with an expiration date of June 30th, 2018, and also Marla Hank to the Conservation Commission. The town clerk had brought to the town administrator's attention that the town administrator's attention needed amendments to the prior two appointments. What was the amendment, the expiration date?
One of the people did not have a current 2015 expiration date, and she believed they should have, and therefore needed to be appointed. And the other person was in the appointment piece, only appointed for a year, and it should have been 3.
Okay, so I would accept a motion to make the amendments to the appointments as stated.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I have a quick question
Sure.
for the cable stuff.
Yep.
Now, once everything's been decided, who reviews the contract to that? Does that go to town council, or does that come to us and we review it?
Heather?
I'm just
So
curious.
I will bring that up at the next meeting once I have people to actually have the board appoint. But the notion is that you want to work with a cable licensing attorney. The question is whether or not we can pay for the attorney out of our current PEG access funds. If we can pay out of the PEG access funds, it's advisable to move forward because they already have an established relationship with the people who negotiate the contract from Charter, and they've also negotiated most of the cable contracts nearby. Therefore, they know what other communities are getting for assets for the government and for their PEG access fund from contributions from Charter. Does that answer the question, Shannon?
Thank you.
Next, we have an appointment of Anthony, is it Lugren? I'm gonna go with Lugren, as the gas and plumbing alternate inspector with an expiration date of June 30th, 2016. The current alternate is no longer interested, and Tom Sears will be away on vacation, needs a backup. So is there a motion to appoint Mr. Lugren as the gas and plumbing alternate inspector?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any other discussion?
Is it safe to assume he has all the licenses and everything that's needed? That's all been vetted?
It should have been, yes. We can have Tom Quinlan double check. He wanted to get it in today, but he did submit an application, so we can have Tom follow up and make sure.
So can we just make this pending that review?
Contingent upon the approval of Tom, yes.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Next, we have upcoming holidays and days off, Christmas and New Year's. Really?
I've been asked.
I did start my Christmas shopping.
I get
just
these
for-
questions, you get these
Okay,
questions.
Christmas and New Year's, which days we're gonna observe the holiday, on Thursday for town hall, or we're gonna make it floaters, a floating holiday? So the personnel policies aren't clear on how to handle Friday holidays for town hall employees. This year, both Christmas and New Year's fall on Fridays. So the question becomes, do town hall employees close offices on Thursday in observance of the holidays, or do they have a floating holiday? How would the board like to proceed?
So it's on Saturday this year?
No, Fridays.
Okay, what happens next year when it's on Saturday? What's the policy?
I'm not on next year. I'm hoping the personnel policies will be updated by
It's
then.
done by then.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of places, it falls on the day it falls, and if you're working, you're working. If
We're
you're
not
not, you're
open.
not. But that's still, if it falls on a Saturday, that's your Saturday. Some places give you an extra day, so I'm just trying to figure out what we've done in the past.
I think
Right,
it's
sure.
been harder because in the past, I imagine by last time this became an issue, it was the fact that people at town hall were working a 5-day work week.
When, can I interrupt for a second?
Yes.
Before we keep going? Did the personnel policies bring this to you?
I've
question?
been asked by several employees, and Art also brought it up.
I'm just wondering if we can check with what we've already done with the bylaw, and I can't remember if we talked about it or not, but if we did, and we changed it already, maybe we should defer to whatever it's been changed to in the
Did we
bylaw.
not change that for 4th of July?
And we said we would,
We never changed anything.
we didn't go, we said we'd rediscuss, which is
We,
why we're
on
here.
4th of July, we did as a floater holiday. Last year for the 4th of July, we observed the 4th on Thursday, even though it occurred on Friday. So the question just really comes down to what the Board of Selectmen wishes to do. It brings up concerns in other departments that work 5 days, and it's all kinds of fun stuff.
What does the highway department do?
I imagine they're gonna have Friday off because Friday is Christmas
Right,
and New Year's.
Floater,
right.
floater day.
And let them take it one day or another. Choose one. I mean, I just don't want to close the town hall and, like, 'cause maybe you don't want Thursday off, maybe you want Monday off.
But one thing to keep in mind with these two holidays is, I can tell you from working municipal governments for years, is that people don't come in on Christmas Eve and New Year's Eve. You have a sporadic few people who are frantic, but generally, they're not coming in on these days. So it makes almost more sense to close before the holiday than after the holiday on Monday morning.
True story.
I mean, yeah, I don't want to set a precedence, because we've got to come up with something that's a policy that makes sense. But this year, I would say if we close on Thursday, that way it's all paid out, it's all done with, and we don't have to worry about people taking time off in the future. And
Is it possible that we hold off on this conversation until the personnel board has, I know that there's a push to finish the amendments of the bylaws. And so I would hate, I'm hopeful we get there before Christmas, but I would hate to make this decision and then have the bylaw be changed to something else, and then we'd have all sorts of confusion.
Yeah, if
At
you-
least we don't need to make a decision about Christmas in August.
Right.
So
If
we
you think
could
they're
wait.
that close, that makes sense.
Right.
And maybe we can ask them to push it along.
Well, I think that's our plan. I think there's been quite a few emails back and forth about trying to get a day where we can just finish it.
Sure.
So,
So bring it back at the end of September?
if it,
We'll
Or
see
even
where we're at.
October, yeah.
okay, so can we, thanks. Special town meeting in the fall. We've been holding special town meetings in the fall to take care of business that's outstanding or that needs to be handled prior to the next annual town meeting. The question comes down to whether the Board of Selectmen wishes to wait until a date we could guess that free cash would become certified, or wish to proceed with setting a date now, and if free cash is not certified, then handling free cash transfers in January and February. What would you like to do? How many days do you need notice to set a town meeting?
Special town meeting requires 14 days notice ahead of time. And the board doesn't necessarily have to decide on this tonight. I just want to keep it on their purview so they know. There is, I miswrote, Liz, on your page, there's a date in November in which the town clerk is out of town, but that's the week of Thanksgiving. So we have essentially all through October, all through November.
It just seems like there would be some sort of cost savings if we waited for free cash to be certified rather than meeting and then saying, oh, by the way, we can't do much, so we just paid everybody to come here and now we're gonna have another one. I would say let's wait until we're more clear about when free cash is gonna be certified.
That's fine, just as long as the board keeps in mind, though, at some point, the board's gonna have to make a decision. We will run out of funds for this building maintenance and also the police station building maintenance.
By
And we
when?
will run out by October. If there's anything else, either routine maintenance or disaster maintenance that comes up, we'll be out of funds for both of these two buildings, and we'll be running a deficit at that point, which we're not supposed to do, so. Even if we have to transfer from operating if free cash isn't available.
What two accounts are those? The,
Larrabee building and the town hall building.
So is it fair to say we should establish a date for the first week or two of October?
Well, I mean, I have no problem with the Board of Selectmen waiting another week, waiting till September, see where Vicky feels she stands with closing the books, and also see what we can find from DOR as far as how long it's taking them to certify free cash.
I feel like it wasn't until November last year. I think that we had an initial conversation in October and then it actually happened in November.
And now they're supposedly overwhelmed this year, could even be
Right,
later.
Right, and so,
But it still forces our hand because,
you're gonna run out of money.
yeah,
What about, can you take that money when you run out from the reserve fund until you can get to a meeting?
You can, but the problem runs into, the reserve fund only starts with 17,000 at the beginning of the year. So usually what happens is if we have to borrow from it, like we did last year, where we couldn't take money from an account that had the money, but because it was listed differently, so one was an expense and one was a salary, and we needed to take it from the expense, we had to take from reserve in the meantime before we could transfer it over. So sometimes we use the reserve fund as a holding place, so to speak. We know the money's in the account, we just can't physically get to the account because it's not authorized for that purpose. So we do that sometimes, and I don't know if we're gonna end up doing that at all this fiscal year, but at some point, it comes down to what we need. For instance, Charlie has brought to our attention that we're gonna need heaters on these roofs, or we're gonna have a major problem this year if we get any snow, and we're gonna have ice dams and
A
other
heater on the
issues.
roof?
Yeah, it's gonna be a sauna up there for you,
Seen those,
Liz.
I think so.
We're gonna have the jacuzzi next.
Okay. So, do you
But that's
wanna
just an
wait a little
example of
longer
additional
to set a
costs.
meeting for October, or do you wanna?
but my suggestion is we set up a target date be October 20th. It's just a talking point at this point, but it'll start moving us in that direction. October 20th is a Tuesday.
So you mean don't we usually do town meetings, is it usually a Tuesday or Monday?
Tuesday.
Tuesday?
Well, we can do what we want, so.
I'm
Okay.
just looking at if we establish a date, as long as we're not posting anything or anything, it's not costing us anything,
No.
but it gives us a date to work towards.
It also gives department heads the opportunity to know what date they're working towards on their bylaws that they're
Right.
trying to submit. We'd like to meet before.
Well, there's no school on the 13th either. I don't know if that makes it easier to book the cafeteria.
On the what?
The 13th.
13th of September? That's a Sunday?
October.
Oh,
October.
Forget September.
I don't know if that makes a difference in scheduling or not, but there's no, usually not,
Columbus Day, right?
yeah, well, the 12th is Columbus Day, but the 13th is the day after.
And they're closed?
Is it a holiday?
Yeah, there's no
After Columbus Day?
I have no idea anymore.
parent-teacher conferences.
Oh,
That's
Will
another
that
holiday
meet?
for the kids.
Do you have a calendar yet? I have an extra
not
one.
a school calendar.
I'm just looking at if we establish a date to aim for, then
Yep.
all the different,
So let's aim, which one?
I say the 20th.
Okay, so we'll aim for the 20th,
For our meeting?
special town meeting, to cover probably the fees at the Larrabee Building and the Town Hall.
And I'll touch base with the moderator, make sure he's available as well. But if that's our goal, we can update as we get closer.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next, we have personnel change forms. The following, the board could choose to approve pending the approval of the Personnel Policies and Procedures Board, which is meeting, you said Thursday night, it's not?
Thursday afternoon.
I was gonna say it's Thursday at 3,
Yeah.
so,
Did you miss one?
no,
I have D on this agenda, bylaws, establishment.
I don't have D.
Oh, that's because, John, I've had some technical difficulties this week, and every time I amend something because someone emails me and says I forgot something, need to add something, I delete 4 other things.
So am I reading D or no?
Yeah, you can read D.
Establishment of bylaws advisory committee.
All right, well, sent me with, I'll print out a copy for myself, but I seem to hand
Oh,
it.
so we have the establishment of a bylaw advisory committee, and that would be why this bylaw
Just hang on-
paper
Just hang on to that, because I got a copy.
is right in front of me. Okay, so you want to establish, Heather wants us to establish a bylaw committee.
This was actually a suggestion of Charlie's, I cannot take credit.
Okay, so I'll read this then. The bylaw committee is charged with conducting a thorough review of all current general bylaws to ensure that they have been adopted by town meeting, submitted to the Attorney General, approved by the Attorney General, published according to the requirements of Mass General laws and the directives of the Office of the Attorney General. The committee shall draw on all necessary public records of the town clerk and the Office of the Attorney General to confirm the validity and completeness of the basic bylaw document, confirming the validity of any individual bylaw before proposing any revisions for repeal in the relevant bylaw for action by voters at special or annual town meetings, proposing edits and changes to improve clarity in bylaws and review all requests from others for bylaw changes. This review shall include, but not be limited to, the following: an analysis of the pros and cons of the requested change, a report concerning how employees, committees, boards, and commissions would be affected by the change, a determination of the financial impact, if any, on the town, confirmation of the legality of the proposed change with advice of town council if approved by the Board of Selectmen or Attorney General, should this be necessary to make that determination, and assembling of any and all pertinent information that will allow the voters to make a conscious decision regarding the proposed change.
Would you like me to give you
Yes, please.
a quick overview?
Yes.
Heather and I and the town clerk were reviewing the bylaws relative to animal control. As we started digging into there, we started realizing that the enumeration of all the different bylaws are not set in any format that's easy readable. Further, when we start looking at the antiquated bylaws that we have, it was very obvious that we need to start bringing these things back up to where we should be. I've had conversations with the police department, the Board of Health, and others about the fact that they would like certain things added, and so on and so forth, in these bylaws. This is not going to be a 10-minute committee by any stretch of the imagination. It's not going to touch zoning stuff at all. The purpose is basically all these bylaws that we have that need to be bundled, formatted properly, brought up to current standards, and then readopted.
Does this fall at all under the purview of the Personnel Policies and Procedures Board? Procedures being bylaw, or no?
No.
What about under the planning board? They don't?
They do zoning.
And we're not touching zoning. They do that.
They just did a whole new one.
Right. What we're looking at is, you have a bylaw on shoveling snow off the sidewalk. You have a bylaw relative to loose animals in town. You have a bylaw of, basically trash being dumped in town. There's all these little things that are out there. that needs to be basically corralled, put into a presentable package, easily readable, and that makes sense by current understandings.
I would think part of the job, big part of the job is also to verify that they're still meeting the AG's or IG's guidelines and they're not outdated.
Well, one of the things that you see in some of our bylaws is bylaws are adopted, but there's no servability clause. In other words, if a law passed and changed, these bylaws may not be enforceable.
So you would like to, someone would like to make a motion to create a bylaw committee? And how many people would be on the committee? And who would compose the committee?
I think this is where a little bigger committee is going to be useful. And when I say a little bigger, maybe 5 people, because I think there's a lot of talent out in the community that may be interested in serving on this committee, because we've got to have people with some kind of experience, legal experience or whatever experience, because there's going to be a lot of research on this committee. So hopefully we can draw a lot of volunteers that are interested in doing this. So I would suggest 5.
I agree with you, John. 5 people.
So a 5-person bylaw committee.
Yeah, maybe 1 from the board, like any committee.
It could be rotating, right?
I like that.
Could be, yeah.
So that when someone's available, they could go rather than a commitment.
Or, yeah, you have 2 or 3 that agree to rotate it amongst them, whatever.
Okay,
Yeah.
so 1 from the Board of Selectmen and 4 from anybody else?
From the
or-
community, I would say.
I'd say community and other boards and departments, because these bylaws affect all these other departments in town.
Yeah. It may be that the members from the boards and departments aren't voting members, they're there as liaisons with the town. But I think when we've talked to folks in the town before, people want to be involved, they want to be informed. This is a perfect opportunity for them to be involved.
So we would have a bylaw committee comprised of 5 people, 1 of which is from the Board of Selectmen. Does that sound about right? Would anyone like to make a motion to establish a bylaw committee?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Now we have personnel change.
Do you want to figure out how we're going to start this up with the board, like we did
With
with
us?
the others? Yeah.
Maybe we need, before we appoint somebody from, I mean, it can just be any of us, but we need 4 other members first.
And since we're going to rotate it, or possibly rotating it, maybe at the first meeting, we all go to the meeting.
Then you have to call a meeting of the Board of Selectmen if we're all there.
That's fine.
Okay. So we shove it on a Tuesday night. Right here.
At 4 o'clock.
Okay. Can I go now to the PCF?
Sure.
Okay. So we have PCF, the Personnel Policies and Procedures Board is meeting tomorrow at 3 o'clock. So these could be approved pending the approval of the PQB tomorrow. First, you have Velda Goldberg as the administrative assistant to the town administrator. This is a new hire. You have Lori Stewart, the principal assessor, which is a resignation. You have Geraldine Swanson as the health director on an emergency basis for 2 weeks, and also as the health director for a temporary position of 12 weeks. Brandon Kavanaugh as a probationary firefighter, and Adam Cutter as an EMT firefighter. I'm just looking, I can pass them on.
Yeah, we have them in our package.
Yeah,
You have them in your package?
Yes.
you should have it on the printout I gave you.
They're also on the printout screen right there.
Oh,
So
thank
this
you.
is the first one. I can scroll to any particular if anyone's interested. Second one.
Do you want to approve or not approve all of them at once, or would you like to do them one at a time?
I move that we approve them all at once.
So there's a motion on the floor to approve all PCFs. There's 6 of them.
I second.
Is there further discussion?
Yeah, I have a question
Sure.
in general. And we have on every PCF, we have a date to be effective, and that's the wording that's used. And oftentimes, these dates to be effective, as I'm looking at them, are after all the signatures are gathered. So I think we need to discuss that before we carte blanche approve all of these, because some of these may go back weeks, month. Are all these people in the position? Are they working? And we're expected to approve these retroactive? 'Cause I know the PQB feels that when they sign it, that's when they're approving the person to start work. So I just want to clarify.
If we motion that it's approved, as long as the PPB board approves it, then it'll be up to them to verify that,
Well, the PQB approves it before us.
but not in this case.
Right, so we had this happen a couple
Right.
of weeks ago. We called a special meeting because the process was to follow the rules. The PQB gets it, and then it moves on to us. So let me just start by saying the assistant to the town administrator is date to be effective September 1st.
Right.
So even if you waited, you're still going to be signed off before the effective date.
Yeah, that one I have no issue. That's why I wasn't going to vote to do them all at once. I was
There's
gonna-
one in here that the effective date is June 24th.
That's probably the termination, though, is a resignation, isn't it?
No,
No, it's June
Oh,
16th.
that's-
Or
June
July
24th.
16th. Where's
there's
that
one for, there's one for June 24th.
June?
There's one for July 28th. And none of those have gone to the PQB yet.
Yeah.
And so the same thing I say every time this happens is I would prefer to follow the process.
Yeah,
and-
I agree.
and not approve until they've signed off on them.
Yeah.
And Heather, I'm just wondering why the two that are June and July haven't gone to, the PQB has met since then.
I think what's happened on a couple of these is for whatever reason, things have been passed back a couple times. One of the reasons all of these are submitted to the board tonight is the same thing we talk about numerous times, which is we try to keep the process moving whenever we can. The Board of Selectmen, the notion of approving, so as long as they're looking at, they're not saying it wouldn't approve it in the first place, it makes sense for them to approve it conditional upon Pretty Please Board signing off on Thursday. Another thing being, we don't meet for 2 weeks. So a lot of times you're gonna hold folks up for 2 weeks. For instance, my assistant position, you see a start date of September 1st, so that would allow the person to start fresh September next week. If you hold off, that means theoretically they wouldn't be able to start for 2 weeks after that. I've been without an assistant since April. So the importance of moving forward. The other problem is that the longer folks wait on signing off on these, it allows for folks to actually move forward and do an emergency PCF. Because the emergency PCF, although essentially gets rubber stamped later on, one is allowed through the Pretty Please policies to actually hire someone if it's in nature of having business continue and move forward because it's going to take too long to get through the other process. And that allows them up to 2 weeks, which is what you've seen here with, for instance, I think it's Ms. Swanson for the emergency health director piece. So the Board of Health tried their best to comply. They did an emergency basis for up to 2 weeks so they could get a temporary one approved, and in the process, the temporary one would be approved this week. The problem is, if the Board of Selectmen wishes to wait, the emergency CF will run out before the Board of Selectmen can approve the temporary one. And all of this comes down to the notion of the Board of Health trying to do their best with everything dotted. I think there's a misconception with having things signed off in a quote-unquote process, which is the notion of, does it really change anything if the Board of Selectmen sees something 2 days before the PPPB sees it, if they were going to have no objection to it anyway, as long as the PPPB signed off on it first?
Get all that?
Yep.
Part of it.
So how would the board wish to
So
proceed?
is the answer to my question, what the date to be effective on the top of these is what we're signing for?
Well, if the board's uncomfortable with whatever the dates are, I mean, I would have no objection to the board writing in where if this is effective, the day after the PPPB signs it.
So let me just ask you this question then. The one in your office, I don't really have a problem with. I can't say no to a resignation because they don't work here anymore. The Board of Health is, what's today, the 24th anyway, right? So that's, you're
25th,
really
right.
not, messing up anything there. But the ones that are dated back to June and July, if we sign off today, does that mean we're going to pay them going back to the date that it was effective?
Well, if you want, vote and approve it as of the date the
Like, have they
PPP
been
signs
working
off.
without any paperwork?
They've been working.
I don't know, I imagine what happened on
And
those.
if they haven't, then why isn't the date effective today?
I imagine what happened was that those were the initial forms that were originally submitted before they were returned to the department head for modification. Therefore, if the board wants to approve and say, you know, we vote for those that can be adjusted for the date to be effective the day after, no sooner than the day after, the triple PB board signs.
I'm just gonna make sure that those people weren't already working.
Yeah,
You know what I
Right?
mean?
here it
Yeah.
is.
Because what if like this cutter started working in June, and it's just because the
I mean, I
boards
think that
haven't met
probably we would have gotten a
coincide?
note somewhere along the line that said, who is this person? We have no paperwork on them. So Heather's probably right. It's just an oversight of the date. And so I don't disagree with changing the date effective the day after the PQB signs off on it. I'm sure it was an oversight in not changing the date.
So I guess my question is still, what's the policy and the procedure going forward? If we want to stick by the rules, what are the rules in this case?
Then you, if you want to stick by the rules, then the rules say the PQB signs them and then they come to the Board of Selectmen.
Well,
Does it
not
say
so
they
much
do that
to,
and then the order, or does it just say they both sign off?
yeah, not so much about that particular rule, but when do they become effective? Do we have anything from the PQB in the
I
policy?
think it's, they redid the form, so they would be effective on the date. It says date to be effective. It doesn't say date you started the job. It says date effective.
Right, and they're all, a lot of them are before. So going forward, we should make it clear that these are all effective after all the signatures are signed off on.
Right.
So there's just ways to get around the policies.
How does the board wish to proceed?
I personally think we should take them one at a time, but
All
I'm,
right, so
I'm,
I'll
only-
start at the beginning.
well,
I'm going to start with the
we've
easiest
already got a
one.
motion in a second,
Oh,
so you
so
have
who
to,
made the motion?
if they want to go that way, take
You
a
want to go
vote.
that way, or do you want to go one at a time?
I go the whole way to be done with
All right, so there's a motion on the floor to approve all the PCFs as a whole. There's a second. Is there any other discussion about approving them all at once?
Yeah.
If not, all those in favor of signing all the PCFs for Velda Goldberg, Lori Stewart, Geraldine Swanson, Brandon Kavanaugh, and Adam Cutter, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those that want to say nay.
Nay.
So the motion passes, and we will sign off on all the PCFs.
And just to be clear, that was contingent upon PPPB or no?
it. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Can I sign these after, as to not hold us up?
You'll also be there Thursday, so you can always sign then.
All right, okay. Thursday. We have a PRF, which is going to be continued until the Finance Committee and PQB can approve. There's still some discussions. Wait a minute, this is separate.
That water technician one, that's where you're at, right?
Am I passing over this one, Heather, for the water technician?
It's up to the board how they wish to proceed. I put it on there that you could do the same thing and make it contingent upon, but that one has two signatures, both finance and PPPB. And I was also concerned that the Board of Selectmen, given John's prior comments at the beginning of the meeting with the joint meeting with the water commissioners, would have some concerns about anything to do with the job description as was, or any other pieces of it. So I wasn't sure this is going to be one of those easy things that there's going to be no objections if it were taken in of itself.
So this is a PRF for the water department for a water technician, which is a new position. There's a copy of the posting attached. It has not gone to the PQB yet, so I don't know if they scored it. I don't know if they've looked at and the other ones, the finance is not really the issue. On the PRF, the finance and funding is an issue, so.
Yeah.
Is that why the accountant signed it and not the finance committee?
Yes, we changed the form anyway, so the finance committee doesn't see it because they don't have access to exactly where the funds are at that
Oh,
very
okay.
moment.
Okay.
I've got a question.
Sure.
And based on the conversation we had before with the Water Commission, it was there. There it goes, hold on.
You want the hard one?
No, it's okay, I'll just stop touching the screen. It says there's only a single full-time employee for the water department, and an additional qualified person needs to be available. So this is to get, I guess, check chlorination for the town, 18 hours. And this position is $32 an hour, which is to do the work that we have a qualified person to do right now. Is that qualified person that's on the payroll making $32 an hour?
I don't know the answer to your question.
Because if not, then I don't think we should be
Isn't he salary?
hosting.
I don't know.
I don't think any of our water department folks are salary, except the head of it.
Just the head, and that was
Yeah,
it?
There
because,
seems like there's quite a few questions associated with this,
Yeah.
so perhaps it needs to go to the PQB first.
yeah, I don't want to be building this job for anybody. I want to make sure it's equitable across the board.
So does the board want to pass over or move forward? The motion to,
Second.
is there any other discussion?
Second,
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. There's a payment of unused vacation time in the highway department, but there's still some discussions about the amount of money that this is, so we're gonna continue it until another time. We have no licenses, no contracts. We need to sign an authorized contract signatory for state projects. So these are annual forms requiring the Board of Selectmen's approval to allow Randall and Heather to sign Department of Transportation documents. Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
aye.
And there's also a form for MEMA aid, so there's a request for a mutual aid signature for MEMA and for emergencies. Charlie has further information.
I spoke to the Director of Mass Emergency Management over the weekend, and evidently Southampton's the only one that hasn't signed on for this, with all the communities in the area. Basically, what it means is we acknowledge the fact that we'll share resources and they'll share resources in times of emergency. So it's just basically a paper pass to make sure everybody's on the same page.
Is there a motion to sign the mutual aid paper?
I'll make the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We have the payroll warrants.
Liz,
Why don't you read those?
would you like me to bring that back to me?
Do you want me to sign in two places? I'll wait till the end. You give that to Heather. Will you read the payroll warrants? You can read that.
Just
one
payroll warrants.
separate. You can read all of them. We need
Okay.
to vote on this one separately, on that one separately.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to read the warrants. First one is PD 16-7 for $32,264.08. Want to do them separate, or are these together?
We can do them separate. Is there a motion?
I made the motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Second warrant is W 16-8A for $57,900.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The third is P 16-9 for $183,743.54.
Is there,
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Fourth is W 16-08 for $72,119.71.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 And now we have a fifth one with no designation on it. It's a payroll warrant for an additional amount to be paid for Shannon Cutler for a total of $518.75, which, as I'm understanding it, she is requesting to get back pay for a position that was recently approved that she has moved into on a temporary basis.
So as far as I can remember, I think when we approved the PCF, it was based on that date and not retroactively, and the pay that they're looking for is retroactive pay. So based on the vote that was taken the last time, which we said we weren't gonna pay going backwards, so we need to decide if you want to pay backwards or not.
Well, that's why I think we need to follow the policy and do whatever the policy states.
So that, what is the date on the PCF then? Because that would be the,
Not attached here. Let's see if it's here.
I don't have it.
Check one of those folders, Liz, on your right.
I don't see it.
I can go grab it, I think, from,
Hold on here. Let me see if this is it.
Do you want to start signing those?
It's not here either. Both your signatures same time. There's multiple in there. I believe.
Pass that one. Oh, I missed one here.
Oh, you did the front cover sheet on this one? You didn't see that one?
So this says date effective July 1st. We signed it on August 6th. So I guess it depends on what the motion was. Do you have that?
5 minutes.
So can we move on, and can we find that out and come back into open session after executive session at some point?
I
so
don't
we
think,
can
I think you have a couple more minutes of open, so
Okay.
give me 5.
try and move these guys along, that's all. So we're gonna move past that, just hold on to that. Okay, there's those. We have approval of minutes. Did everybody have a chance to look over the minutes?
Yes.
I did look at
Okay, I
them.
did too.
So we have minutes from August 6th, August 11th, which was a regular meeting, and the approval of executive session minutes, and August 13th, which was a special meeting. I would accept a motion to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second?
Is there any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Our next meeting, I can't believe we're in September. Our next meeting is September 8th and 22nd. Department reports with public safety is on September 8th. October 20th is the performance reviews for the highway and town administrator, so if you have blank forms or need blank forms to rate your review, you can get them from Heather or check your email, because I think she sent out blank ones a while back. Can you repeat that? Yep.
The town administrator.
Town administrator on the 20th, which would be the date that we wanted to have the special town meeting. So we either have to change the reviews or not have that special town meeting on the 20th. We want to
Well,
move the reviews. We're
It's,
really good at that.
yeah, it's just on hold right now, so we can give it a couple weeks before we have to decide to change.
Okay. Heather said we have 5 minutes, but I think she was lying. Because the only thing left on my agenda, as long as Mrs. Walunas has double-checked my dotted i's and t's, is executive session. Am I right? Okay, so we're just waiting.
Did you find the answer?
No.
You have the minutes in your hands.
For which one? Is this the joint meeting?
August 6th.
You said August 6th.
Special meeting.
I'm sitting there going,
Oh, 'cause I didn't
they're
get
not
to it yet.
online.
Okay, so there was a motion by the Board of Selectmen to approve with the additional caveat that the Board of Assessors will acknowledge that the temporary box should have been checked off. It doesn't have an effective date, so if we're going based on what the effective date is, then we have to make pay retroactively to July 1st.
Didn't we just talk about going on when the signatures were done? During the last group?
I thought we talked about it based on the effective date.
We did, because we just approved all those other ones.
Based on the effective date.
But I believe the notion was that all the effective dates would be no sooner than the last date someone signed.
That's not how we just
That's
approved
not
the
how I
last
approved,
bunch.
that's not how
No.
we approved
We
that.
just approved them as they were, by the effective date.
I know I didn't approve them, so, can you read it back,
Read back what?
what we said?
Just about the last PCF?
Yeah. One was a resignation, so that didn't matter, and one had the wrong date that was gonna go forward.
Mm-hmm. The others
other
were
one was
from,
9/1, so that hasn't gotten
June
here yet.
something.
And
the other were
was for yesterday.
June and July.
Mm-hmm.
June and July?
So, let me ask you a question. Was she doing this work because of the fact that there was no employee there?
Yes.
But,
So, in good faith, she did the work, even though the paperwork didn't catch up to where it should be.
Yes, but here's what I'm gonna say. So you're gonna sign off on retroactive pay effective July 1st, but the resignation of the person that she was taking the job over for is, even at the Board of Assessors date, is July 18th. So that means you're paying two people an increased wage.
Right, and that's what I'm not trying to accomplish that.
That's what would happen if you paid retroactively to July 1st.
well, let me ask a question, because maybe the incumbent at the time took vacation time and she wasn't there, so I guess we need to ask that question
Of who?
of Shannon Cutler. You would probably want to go into step away from this just to, I mean, there could be circumstances, I don't know, so we got to ask the question.
My suspicions are that the individual that resigned left and wasn't there. That left that employee to take care of the...
Last working day was July 16th
Okay,
of the person that resigned.
okay.
I understand that, but the
Okay.
people take vacation time.
So let me just shed a little light so you don't have to debate over that. She was gone on vacation the whole month of July. I think she came back maybe one day. If you pull her pay tickets, you'd probably see it. I think she had vacation or personal and came back one day to submit that. I think Jen's in the office. You could have her pull the pay tickets.
I'm still unsure, to be honest with you.
I don't disagree. But I know that you have to process the payroll.
Well, this is something we can catch up on later, if needed.
So we have too many questions to approve retroactive pay at the moment, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, that's basically what I'm saying. We need a policy, a procedure that we can look at these and say yes, no, and instead of debating them every time. And it's, the individuals get stuck in between, that's the problem. So I recommend we postpone it till the next meeting, get some more information, because it's not holding up the normal pay, it's just holding up
The retroactive.
a retroactive, and that'll be retroactive regardless.
Okay, so there's a motion to pass over, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Is there any other discussion? All those in favor of passing over, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Just hold this stuff for now. We're going to move into executive session. We will not be returning into open session under Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21, Number 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body and the chair so declares. Under Number 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining if an open meeting may have detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body. Under Number 2, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for collective bargaining. And under Number 1, to discuss complaints against a public officer official, and to approve executive session minutes under Section 21, Number 1, to discuss the physical health of an individual. Under Number 3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation, and under number 3, to discuss strategy with respect to litigation. By roll call vote, please.
Kinnicky, aye.
Martin, aye.
Moulton, aye.
Cutler, aye.
And unless you all watch every night on Tuesday nights at home, usually we run to the bathroom and then come right back right now.